Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today I am talking about the ketogenic diet, but not just keto, but keto for women. And my guest is Tasha Metcalf. She has a website called Ketogasm. She's a nutrition educator, an author, a blogger. Her book is Keto, A Woman's Guide and Cookbook. Now, I know there's a lot of information out there about the ketogenic diet. And as women, there are different things our bodies need. So I thought, why not have a conversation with someone who's gone on that journey, who's passionate about that journey, and who can help kind of clarify all of the questions and confusion that might surround the idea and the desire to get involved with the ketogenic diet. So, Tasha, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is my pleasure. Now, I know that you have taken an amazing journey yourself, and the keto diet has been a big part of your health journey. So why don't you share your story about what led you to get involved with eating in a ketogenic way, what it's done for you, and where that's taken you to this point?
Perfect. Okay. I'll start back from the very beginning. I think this is back in about 2011, and my partner and I were trying to get pregnant, but I was not able to do that. I had a lot of crazy, wild things going on with my hormones, and I stopped having my period completely for about a year, I would say. And I wasn't really sure what was going on with me. I had gained a lot of weight. I had really bad acne. And I went to my doctor in tears, like, what's going on with me? And I got a PCOS diagnosis. At the prompting of my practitioner, they suggested I go on a low-carb diet. So I started that at that time, and eventually came to eat a ketogenic diet, which is a very low carb diet. For most people, it's under 50 grams of carbs per day. Mm-hmm. And with that, I started to lose weight. I got my periods back. My health kind of turned around, like complete 180, and I got pregnant. And I have been doing keto ever since. But during those two pregnancies, they were back to back. I ended up gaining quite a bit of weight. And my idea at the time, after I had my second child, I decided to post my weight loss journey on YouTube. And that's how I started my website and my blog. And all of this stuff was started by sharing my own journey with the ketogenic diet, because I knew it worked really well for me. And I wanted to show other people what's possible if you just stick to something for even a little bit of time. So at my heaviest weight, when I posted this YouTube video of myself, I was 250 pounds, give or take. And 4 months later, I had lost 50 pounds. So I posted that on YouTube, and the response that I got there was amazing. And people are like, what are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. And I wanted to help as many people as I could. So I started sharing my recipes, and it was more of like a food blog. And here's what I'm cooking. Here's what I'm eating. And here's where I'm at with things. And it was more of a personal journey. But as I started doing that and people reaching out and using me as a resource, I wanted to learn more and more and more. And I have a background in science. I have a biology person. And so I went back to grad school, and I'm working on my master's degree in nutrition. And that's kind of like been like my whole life has just been focused and dedicated to nutrition. And with that, I've been given all of these really amazing opportunities to help people change their health and turn their life around by changing their diet, because at the root of most health issues, it's what you're feeding yourself and what you're fueling your body with. And whether that's keto or low carb or not, you can really dramatically change who you are and what you're doing by changing your diet. And that's what I'm all about right now. But I've been really focused on working with women doing keto because people see what I did and then they want to know more about that. So I've been helping people with my website and I started a podcast. Like I have all of these really cool resources and everything like that. So that is who I am, what I'm all about. And I'm super excited to be here and talk to you and share with your listeners as well.
Awesome. What's the name of your podcast?
My podcast is Keto-gasm also. Like everything I do, I'm like, Keto-gasm. That's perfect.
All things Keto-gasm.
Yep. It's
Tasha
fun.
Equals Keto-gasm. That's awesome.
Pretty much.
All right. Awesome. So what's the number one question that people have about the ketogenic diet? Because one of the things that I have heard, the words are your macros and your micros and all of these things. So it seems very complicated. So can you kind of give me an overview of what exactly a true ketogenic diet, what it looks like, what it is?
Absolutely. Okay. So there are probably millions of different ketogenic protocols out there. And that's part of the reason why it's so confusing, because a lot of people use ketogenic diets for medically therapeutic purposes, right? And they're trying to get their ketone levels up and use some kind of healing benefits of ketones and that perspective. But then there's other people that are using keto as a weight loss and to improve their body composition, right? So the goal is a little bit different. And so the first thing that you want to do when you're doing a ketogenic diet is figure out what your actual goal is, what your purpose for doing keto is. Because if you're trying to, heal Alzheimer's disease or lose 50 pounds, those are two different kind of things. But the main common denominator between all of the protocols for a ketogenic diet is carb restriction. And so when you think about macros, like you mentioned macros, people think that keto is high fat, low carb, moderate protein. And for the most part, that is pretty correct. So fat, protein, and carbs, those are your macros. But the only thing that you really need to concern yourself with is the carb restriction. And that's the tipping point that gets keto going. So that's the common denominator between any kind of ketogenic diet is the carb restriction. So it's not guzzling butter or eating lots of bacon. It's limiting your carb intake to trigger nutritional ketosis. And so what happens when you take the carbs out of your diet, you're basically forcing your body into burning fat. So you stop burning sugar because you're not fueling your body with sugar. Okay. And with that restriction in carbs, you're telling your body, like, I don't have carbs. You're going to have to burn something else. Right. And if you're not burning sugar, the only thing that's really left is to burn fat. And that can come from your plate or it can come from your body. And that's why nutritional ketosis is such an effective fat burning tool for people and helps with weight loss, is because without that constant influx of carbohydrates fueling your body, you're forcing your body to burn fat, and that's tapping into your fat stores. So that's one thing. And most people are just kind of not really sure what keto is when they first hear about it. They're like, so I just drink oil in my coffee or eat butter? Like, what do I do? Because they hear it's a high fat diet, but it's only high fat because if you're not eating carbs, then there's not really your energy has to come from somewhere else, right? So you're getting it from your fat from your plate or from your body. And then, of course, adequate protein to support your lean body mass. But that was where I would start, would just be with that specific common denominator, regardless of what you're doing keto for, is that carb restriction piece. And that's the easiest way to start too.
Now, when you talk about carbs,
mm-hmm.
There's complex and there's simple carbs,
mm-hmm.
right? So your vegetables are carbs, your fruits are carbs. It's not just bread and grains. So when you say carb restriction, what kind of carbs are you talking about?
Okay, perfect. That's a really, really good question. And I am so glad you asked it, because when you eat complex carbs. Those are kind of like the grains, like the whole wheat bread or the quinoa and things like that. They're the starchy, more complex things. So, and then you have the simple carbs, and those are like the sugars. So the big difference there between those two is that the complex carbs take a little longer to digest, but once they are digested, they turn into those simple sugars in your body. So those do influence ketosis. But fiber is also a carb, technically, right? But fiber is not digested in the same way that your body would metabolize a complex carb or a simple sugar. So they don't impact ketosis at all. They don't directly impact your metabolism. So you can still eat those high fiber things, like the high fiber vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables. Those are the kinds of things that you want. So like maybe a potato might not be your best vegetable choice, but something like leafy greens with like lots of high fiber, even low sugar, high fiber fruit like berries, those have a lot of seeds in them. So there's actually a lot of fiber there in addition to just being a sweet thing. Or avocados, like there's a lot of different kinds of vegetables that can be eaten on a ketogenic diet. And a lot of people think that keto is a restrictive diet and like you can't eat these foods or you can eat these foods. And it's not really about following black and white rigid rules. It's more about getting into a metabolic state of ketosis. So in order to do that, it's not about choosing specific foods that you can and can't eat. It's about like finding the right amounts of stuff that you can and can't eat, or that you can eat. You can eat anything and it can be keto if you take a small enough bite, right? But if you slice it thin enough, anything can be keto. So it's not like very strict and like you can't eat these foods or you can't ever do this or that. It's more of like finding out what foods are support nutritional ketosis and like naturally, which would be anything that is lower in carbohydrates, like those non-starchy vegetables. And then there's like all of those high protein type foods. Some of those naturally high fat foods are also really great for it. Nuts, seeds, anything like that. Meats are great. And so there's a lot of foods that you can eat. It's not super restrictive because it's a lot of flavorful, delicious foods, but it's shifting your intake from like what you might normally just like eat unlimited amounts of to kind of support ketosis instead of off limits and what's, a free for all basically.
So now on the topic of potatoes, what about yams and sweet potatoes? Where do those fall on the scale?
Yams and sweet potatoes are also starchy. It's not like a hard and fast rule, but a good way to think about it is if it's like grows underground, like a tuber, any of those starchy tubers, even carrots, they are a little higher in carbohydrates just because they're that like kind of like starchy, sweet, almost flavor. Those have a little extra carbs and sugar in them. And it's not that you can't eat them. You just have to eat smaller portions if you do choose to include them in your diet.
Okay. So just kind of knowing where they're grown, you can kind of utilize that. That's a great thing to remember. Now, I know that like if you grab like popular keto recipes, there's a lot of cheese and there's a lot of things like that. So let's have a conversation about the fats side of it. What are the kinds of fats that you have found have been healthy and supportive and in getting you into that state of ketosis?
Okay, that's a really good question because there are a lot of fats that people are like, oh, I'm just going to eat nonstop, melted cheese. And my mom, the other day, she went to pick up a pizza somewhere and they had a keto pizza and it was just a tub of like melted cheese and pizza toppings. And I was like, oh, that's really not what you want to eat. Yeah, that's disgusting. I was kind of appalled, but I was like, it's kind of gimmicky, like, oh, you can eat these high fat foods. But I think that focusing on fats that are anti-inflammatory. So you have like I can't speak properly, sorry, omega-3 and omega-6 fats. And we need to eat more omega-3 fats to promote anti-inflammatory pathways in our body. So things like salmon, that's a high fat food that's really, really good and health promoting, or monounsaturated fats like olive oil and things like that. You can still eat saturated fat like from animals and things like that. That's okay because your body's using it really to burn for fuel. But trying to balance what you're taking in those more healthy fat type of ways helps your body overall not promote inflammation, because you don't want to just eat all of these crazy fats and just think that that's what you're going for. And if your goal is weight loss, you don't actually need to consume all those high fat things just because in the name of keto, right? So a calorie deficit is still required when you want to lose weight, regardless of what diet you're on, what dietary pattern you choose. Even keto requires a calorie restriction. Okay. So one of the things that I tell people is that keto makes the calorie restriction piece a little bit easier because it has kind of an appetite suppressing effect. So going for those really high fat foods that like the melted tub of cheese and with pizza toppings, that's not really, that's not the lowest calorie option either, right? So choosing the things that are low in carbs and calories can help you support ketosis and weight loss, because like I said, if you have a lot of stored body fat, that's energy that your body will readily burn. So you need to create a calorie deficit to tap into some of that stored fat. And it's just one of those things that you don't necessarily need all of the high fat foods in order to be keto. That's more of something that if somebody was to say, I'm going to do keto and I don't want to lose any weight, they would need to eat a lot of high fat foods in order to support that. But if their body is supplying all of the fat, then you can kind of chill out on the fat intake and let your body supply the energy your body needs to efficiently run.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is you're looking at the fat and the source of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to lose weight, then effectively I'm the source of fat.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I tell people when they're counting their macros. They have their carbs, their protein, and their fat, and that can come from your food if you choose it to come from there, or it can come from your love handles. It can come from any part on your body that you want to choose.
You're like, I got my fat right here.
Yeah. And that's what most people, it's unfortunate because it is confusing, and there is a misconception about keto being like this magic bullet that you can eat unlimited fat and like bulletproof coffee. You just all of these things that are kind of gimmicky, and it's not that it's completely different than any other diet. It's just like you're partitioning your macros a little differently, and you still need that basic kind of like overarching calorie deficit to drive the weight loss. Regardless, you could eat like Twinkies all day long, as long as you weren't eating over your body's energy needs and you were like eating in a calorie deficit, you'd still probably lose weight. But keto is awesome because it is a protein sparing diet that supports your lean body mass and allows you to burn your body fat. And I think a lot of people, when they're focused on losing weight, they are focused on the number on the scale, and they're not really worried about their body composition. So they're not worried about if they're burning body fat, and they're not worried if they're burning their muscle tissue, basically. And the metabolically active tissue that keeps your metabolism up and running at optimal rates, that's your muscle tissue. That's like, if you were to go pound for pound, fat tissue versus your muscle, you want to have muscle. You do not want that fat tissue taking up space. But especially as you get older and your metabolism starts to decline, that's a result of your lean body mass declining. that your lean body mass takes a nosedive. So you start to lose that muscle tissue and your fat tissue increases because your metabolism dropped. And you start gaining the fat in places that you didn't normally gain fat. So instead of your hips, you're gaining it in your abdomen. You know, it's that weird change in hormones that you experience as you age, that your lean body mass is declining and your metabolism drops as a result of that. And you're storing fat in all the places that you don't want to store fat. And as a result, your insulin resistance skyrockets. So you're not able to effectively metabolize carbohydrates in the first place. And your metabolism, your energy expenditure totally tanks. So eating a ketogenic diet is a really great way to help your body find an alternate pathway to burn that fat that you're storing. Stop, you're not fueling with carbs anymore because your body's not effectively burning that anyways. So it's a really great way to offer a different pathway for your metabolism, because your body is really, really cool. And it has all these different ways to shift around with the nutrients that you're fueling it with. And ketosis just supports that alternate pathway.
Now, one of the things that I have heard you do or can do, I think they call it carb cycling.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and who it would be beneficial for? Like, what
Absolutely.
is the point of carb cycling?
Okay. So with a standard keto diet, you're eating low carb indefinitely, right? And a lot of people they can't get on board with that. They're like, no, like it sounds fun, but not for me. So carb cycling is a good thing for those people that are like, I would like to do keto and have the benefits of that, but maybe intermittently I would like to have a cupcake or some ice cream or some kind of sugary thing. That's one person that would benefit for it. The other people that benefit from something like that are women who might be doing some kind of calorie restriction, ketogenic diet, carb restriction. When you're dieting, your body, if it's carb restriction or calorie restriction, your body it's any kind of restriction, your body doesn't like that long-term. You know, it's kind of stress for your body. For women especially, we're really, really sensitive to that hormonal fluctuation, and stress drives hormone fluctuations, can increase your cortisol levels. And then in turn, that makes weight loss even more difficult. So having some kind of intermittent way to like say, hey, I'm not actually starving. I'm not, there's plenty of food available to me, telling your body, giving your body those signals to say, hey, things are actually fine. I'm not in a famine, some kind of not stressful situation. That's one way to kind of cue your body to promote further fat loss and decrease your stress load for your body, basically. So I think that for people that love to eat carbs, carb loads and carb cycling can be a really, really great way to do a dietary pattern and then intermittently have those treats. But in addition to that, it can be a strategic way to tell your body like, hey, I think this is fine. Everything's totally okay. Don't think we're stressed out. We're fine. And then that will kind of like help balance out your hormones, and it supports your body composition in the long term.
So it kind of balances the natural stress that your body's going through by restricting your calories.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I have heard, and this is not a challenge, it's a question, that staying in ketosis long term is too stressful for most bodies, and there needs to be kind of an ebb and the flow. Is carb cycling how you do that? How do you manage the actual stress that's happening to your body? Because I think the people who are naysayers are using that to scare people away from the ketogenic diet.
Right. Well, and so as you reduce your carb load, you can stay keto indefinitely, and your body has mechanisms to support that. But there's not honestly a lot of long-term research that says it's bad to be keto forever or that it's good to be keto forever. So it's hard to say with like an evidence-based, this is the way it is and that whether you like it or not kind of thing. There's not a lot of scientific literature that supports a long-term thing because quite honestly, it hasn't been studied for very long-term periods. I think most scientific literature cuts it off around like 1 year, maybe 2 years, not that like lifelong thing that some nutritional dietary patterns have been studied. So there's not a lot of evidence that says one way or another, but you become your body makes adaptations to that restriction. So your body's just really smart and it will adapt to whatever situation you put it into. And so if you do a ketogenic diet for an extended period of time, overall, your body builds up these adaptations to burning fat. And that supports ketosis and it supports fat adaptation. It supports metabolic flexibility, where ultimately you can go from burning fat to burning sugar very easily without that period of having that kind of clunky metabolism that doesn't really know how to burn the fuel that you're putting into it. But for people that are experiencing things where they're trying keto traditionally and it's not really, they don't feel great and they don't love that long-term keto. those carb cycling and increasing the carbs intermittently or periodically, that can help for, whether it's like a mental thing, whether it's like a dramatic physical like improvement. There's people that can benefit from those types of things. So I think the important part is saying what's sustainable for somebody and choosing how to go from there, because it doesn't matter what diet you do. If it's not sustainable long-term, then it's not going to work. It's not going to be a good fit. So if you like keto because you can eat meat and veggies and that's the kind of food that you enjoy eating, then that's a great, fit for you. But overall, if you're having a hard time and you're not feeling great, then, trying the carb cycling or, just using those key takeaways like, okay, fiber is good for me. Vegetables are good for me. I don't have to be afraid of fat. Those kind of key takeaways of a ketogenic diet, I think, are important for everybody, regardless of whatever dietary pattern you choose to be on.
As if someone's transitioning from your standard diet to a ketogenic diet, where's a good place to start? I'm imagining there's a transition period for most people. There are people who can just today make a decision and just turn off the button and go. But most people, you're going to be looking at, okay, I'm going to eliminate this for a period of time. And then, so they're kind of easing into the ketogenic diet. What is the best kind of way to look at that transition to make it successful?
That's a good question. I think that like you said, there's two kinds of people. There's people that are like, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and jump right in. Or people that are like, I need to take this one step at a time in order to actually do this. And that is a really good way to start keto, is just if you are interested in carb restriction, not cutting them all out at once. Because the thing that happens when people do dive right into keto, their body's not used to it, so right away their body is like kind of like, whoa, what are you doing? Where do the carbs go? And in that process, your body starts to make these metabolic shifts and dump electrolytes. And there's this thing called the keto flu, and you can have a headache, feel like kind of dizzy and lightheaded. And you want to have like electrolyte support, and your body is not used to it. So you have to like supplement basically in order to feel okay, or eat MCT oils that are like basically like the quick burning fats that support the ketone production to help your body kind of like go, okay, this is what we're doing. But for the step-by-step thing, that gives your body kind of like a really gentle transition into carb restriction. And so your body's making those adaptations as you kind of cut things out. So maybe you cut sugar out. Maybe you say, okay, maybe I'll try to go sugar-free. Maybe you don't cut all the whole wheat bread out of your diet all at once, right? You're cutting just like these small things gradually over time. So, give yourself like a month, 2 months to like make those adjustments, and those small steps build up to big things over time. And I always say, I would never ask somebody to like get up off of their couch and go run a marathon, right? You have to build up to that kind of thing. And I think the same thing can go for nutrition. You don't ever want to make all of these really big dramatic changes all at once and expect them to be successful. You're going to try everything and then you're going to fall flat on your face. But if you do those small intentional steps towards something like carb restriction, that's going to be working towards a more lasting change. That's what gives you time to learn about, you can read the nutrition labels. You can see, okay, these potatoes and these yams, these are high starch, high sugar vegetables that aren't really going to support my goals, but these ones are a better choice. So you're giving yourself time to experiment and learn and actually experience what you're supposed to be doing or working towards your goals. And that is the behavior piece that goes along with that, like slow, intentional carb restriction or taper. That's even more helpful than just jumping in, because I know people get excited. They're like, I'm going to do this. And then it's hard to just do everything all at once. So if you do those little tiny baby steps towards working towards carb restriction and working towards, okay, maybe your end goal in a few months, you'll be like fully keto. But in that meantime, you're learning about it. You understand it. And I think that can be really helpful. And your body has time to adjust and adapt. And everybody I've seen that has made the transition to keto usually does better with that slow and steady kind of transition.
Well, I would think mentally,
absolutely,
you would feel more successful
Mm-hmm.
because it's doable to take one thing versus all the things. There's always that like small percentage of people that don't understand the rest of society because they literally are just that extremist who can do the thing, but I would say most people, in order to be successful, you have to feel successful. And it's easier to feel successful one step at a time rather than trying to change everything.
Absolutely.
So my next question is, how is the keto diet different for women than it is for men? Because I know body composition wise, typically our muscle mass is less than a man's and our fat stores are higher than men's. So I would imagine that the ketogenic diet might have maybe the outcomes are the same in general, but how is it different for women? How does a woman go about the ketogenic diet to support the way our bodies are designed and the way that, our fat and muscle mass are balanced within our own physical bodies?
That's a great question. I think that the difference between a female body and a male's body are really hormonally driven. So when we're doing keto and we jump right into it and our hormones are like, oh, what are you doing to me? That's not always a great thing, right? So most guys can do a diet and just like start it. And then they're like not, worried about there's girls that start keto and they lose their periods because they just jump straight into it instead of like gradually tapering. And there's people that are, feeling kind of bad when they start. And so I really do recommend the carb taper to transition into something like this. Do it like a little slower and steadier. The other thing is that the guys are able to fast they do intermittent fasting and they feel awesome. A lot of women don't feel great doing that fasting or the really severe calorie restriction. So I think it's hard for women when they're trying to lose weight and they're following these protocols created by men and designed for men to really restrict their calorie intake and really do all of these really intense things that we don't respond to very well. So those are the two things I think that are at the forefront, is like just trying to take a more gentle approach to it, doing that like gradual ease into it, and not starving yourself, not like dropping your calories so low just for the sake of the scale moving. And then also, one thing that a lot of women are concerned about is their weight. And I know that that's important for people, is the weight loss element, but the body composition piece, like most guys are like, oh, I'm going to go get jacked and buff at the gym, and they're trying to build their muscle. And a lot of women aren't ever trying to actually like preserve their muscle and build it up, because they think they're going to get bulky and they think they're going to be, big and buff. And that's not the case. That's really, 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 really hard to build muscle, but it's so easy to lose it. And if you're dieting and you're not eating enough protein, then you are going to lose your muscle in the process. Your body's going to start burning energy, and it's not just going to take it from your fat stores. It's going to actually like tap into your muscle storage, and that will decrease your metabolism. So when people say dieting destroys your metabolism, what they're really, really alluding to is that you're tapping into your lean body mass that is your metabolic furnace that keeps your energy expenditure really high. So for women, especially, I think it's very, very important to eat enough protein. So if you're doing keto, if you can try to focus on eating adequate protein, maybe doing some kind of exercise to preserve your lean body mass. You don't have to exercise and do keto, but I feel like for most women, it would be really beneficial, especially if you want to stay lean or get lean instead of just losing weight. Because if you're just losing weight, there's a good chance that some of that weight is coming from your muscle and not just your fat. And that's going to leave you with poor body composition in the long run. Even if you're a smaller version of yourself, your metabolism is shot, and you're not going to be able to eat anything that you were able to eat before. You're just like kind of dwindling your energy expenditure even lower in the process. So I always really do encourage women to eat probably more protein than they think is necessary for themselves, because especially with dieting, people just think, oh, I'm going to cut down everything, and then at the expense of protein, or they think that that's going to make them, that certain things will make them bulky and bigger, and it's not going to support their weight loss. So even if you were just losing fat and building muscle and the weight stayed the same, the number on the scale stayed exactly the same, your body composition would be completely different, and your body would transform in the process. You'd look like a completely different person. You'd be it's amazing what happens, but people and women especially just don't really focus on that piece, because we've been kind of conditioned to, get skinny. And I think that should be our focus. Shouldn't be to get skinny. Our focus should be to get healthy and lean if we can. So for me, those are the big differences.
It's interesting you talk about hormones. So because a large portion of my audience are women over 45,
mm-hmm.
have so many physical and hormonal changes, and we're all at different stages of it as well, that if we're having difficulty with perimenopause, premenopause, menopause, it seems like the ketogenic diet would be a good support to that transition, because if it balances your hormones and it puts your body in a state of support,
mm-hmm.
right? Then you're going to have more energy and more balance. It's going to help you with stress, but I think putting it in the context of, I want to have a full kind of complete balanced life,
mm-hmm.
not, oh my gosh, my 30th high school reunion's coming and I have to lose 20 pounds by tomorrow.
Right.
Like, maybe if we could support the idea of a ketogenic diet more of, I like when people say a ketogenic lifestyle.
Yeah.
Shifting away from like you talked about the conditioning
mm-hmm.
about our outward appearance and really kind of go inward and go, how does this make me feel?
Well, I think it's really funny because I talk about a ketogenic diets and a big advocate for low carb diets in general, but I hate diets. I really dislike the diet mentality because there's this dogma and these rigid black and white rules that don't really align with real life. And it's this weird mindset that you get into that you're doing things right or you're not. And this is okay, this is not okay. And so when I talk about keto diets or keto dietary, I talk about dietary patterns more than diets. So it's more of like what you're doing overall versus, oh, I ate an apple. Oops, now I cheated and I'm bad. Like those words cheat. Those things are so unhelpful for people who are trying to make sustainable lifestyle changes. Because like you said, it's more of a lifestyle change than a diet. Because if you think about a diet, that's like, oh, I'm going to do this for a couple days or a couple weeks, and then I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. And then you're just right back where you started from. So it doesn't make any sense to approach it that way. And I hate the word diet because that is a direct reflection of a temporary protocol to do something very briefly for one specific goal. But if you're trying to improve your health, you need to make those sustainable changes. And thinking of it as more of a dietary pattern or a lifestyle is so much more healthy and helpful to actually make long-lasting changes.
The other thing that you mentioned was body mass, muscle mass,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of really great fitness instructors and food and fitness people talk about not looking at numbers on the scale, not looking at the numbers in your clothing, because those are basically shifting. Because my daughters and I were looking at body sizes, like size 14, for example. My daughter was looking at 10 years ago or 20 years ago, a size 14 was this size waist, this size hip. Now it's completely different. So they're changing all the time anyway. So there's this idea that, how do you feel when you look in the mirror? And I think for women, those numbers we're addicted to those numbers. But when I lose weight in terms of fat, but I build muscle, there's a point where my weight increases for a while before it decreases. And so there's something to talk about too, is it's not always just a decline immediately, because you're, like you were talking about, I think that's the body doing its thing. As you're building muscle, at some point there's I would say a fulcrum, like a tipping point where then you become a more effective fat burning machine. But it's not going to happen right away, right?
No, it all takes time. And it's the result of like very intentional effort to do that. And if I could gain 5 pounds of muscle and the scale went up, I would be so excited to gain 5 pounds of muscle. I would be so happy. I'd be like, yay. But because overall your body composition is improving. And so like thinking it like the overall like body fat percentage instead of the number on the scale, if you were to want to lose body fat, like measure the body fat, don't measure that number on the scale. That's a reflection of your body fat, your muscle, the water that you're retaining. It's so many different factors go into that, and it fluctuates from the minute you wake up till the time you go to bed from day to day. It's just inconsistent, and it's not a good way to measure. But that body composition piece, if you do want to actually have like a metric that you're tracking, that's the body fat percentage or lean body mass is a lot more meaningful metric to track. But like you said, it's more about how you feel and how, when you look in the mirror, do you love the person that you're looking at? And I hope you do. I hope you look in the mirror and you're like, you're so awesome, I love you. But I wish everyone would throw away their scale in their bathroom and buy a kitchen scale instead, start using that in the kitchen and like measuring things instead of weighing yourself, because it's not a measure of your self-worth. It doesn't tell you anything relevant whatsoever. And it's just, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. I don't know if you can tell. I hate the scale. I don't like diets. I don't like the scale. So it's kind of funny that I talk about weight loss and ketogenic diets like this, but it's not a good measure of your self-worth or your value or what you mean. And I think that the number on the scale is honestly the least important, least interesting thing that you could ever know about you. Like there's so many other cool things that you have to offer. Why would you ever pay attention to that number? That doesn't mean anything.
And I think you can weigh a certain weight that you want to weigh and be completely unhealthy. That whole thing that was going around where they were calling people skinny fat. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
I don't know if that's still a thing, but
yeah.
Where it's like we look at skinny people and we think, oh, they look so good, but that doesn't mean healthy. So if we could collectively, you and I, Tasha, our mindsets and then impacting the mindsets of the women around us, shifting from skinny to healthy, really shifting the language and the mindset about health for women would be amazing.
Absolutely. I'm there. I love that. That is amazing because we are all so wrapped up in like the numbers and like the sizes, and it's just like this weird vanity number that doesn't mean anything. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a DEXA scan, but it like measures, it actually like you step in or you lay in this machine and then it'll like do a full body scan and it'll tell you how much body fat and how much your bones are and your muscle and everything. And when I got out of there, I was like, I can't believe it, like between my bones and muscle, that's like at one point that was like more than my goal weight. You know what I mean? Like I was like, somehow in my head, I thought I had to weigh a certain amount of weight. And then I finds out just between my bones and my muscle, like I was, I couldn't even lose that physically and technically, but we've been trained, we have to be a certain number. It just doesn't even make any sense. So sometimes we can't even get to those numbers if you try your hardest, unless you do really unhealthy things that aren't supporting your health overall. It's a sad situation, I think, but if we can get away from it and we can shift the conversation to health and health at every size, not just, that ideal, I'm doing air quotes right now. I know you guys can't see me, but the ideal body image, I think that's really important to put that as the core value instead of your weight overall.
Yeah, we're kind of in an interesting place right now. Like you're seeing a lot of body positivity, which is good. I think sometimes it overlooks health as well. So that's my one beef with the body positivity is, I don't think long-term carrying 200, 300, 400 extra pounds is going to be a healthy way to live. You shouldn't shame yourself, right? But how do we all move toward what is really more healthy for us? And I think the ketogenic diet for women, you've talked about, sustainability and supporting our metabolic furnace, our muscles. And so as you're kind of coaching someone through going from your traditional, we're in America, a traditional American diet toward a ketogenic diet, what are kind of the big pieces? So we look at your macros, which is your fat, your proteins, and your carbs, right? And we start to kind of find the balance. Now, the terms that I hear are, everybody has to find their macros. So when you're coaching someone, is there kind of like a general, okay, start with so many grams of protein, so many grams of fat? Is there kind of a general rule and then you tweak it from there? Like, how does that work?
So when I am figuring out macros, I start with like the overarching goal. Like, is your goal to maintain weight or do you want to lose a little body fat? And I'm not talking lose weight because I want people to focus on losing body fat. And so we start with that. And that would be like your total daily energy expenditure. And then we kind of take some calories off of that and shave a little bit off to create a calorie deficit. The next thing would be to figure out how much protein to have for your lean body mass. And I usually recommend eating a little higher than like the RDA recommended daily allowance, because that's just an average thing. It's not for weight loss. It's not for athletics. It's not for ketosis. It's intended for the general population. So I would recommend that most women aim for bare minimum would be 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body mass, upwards to 1 gram of protein per pound of body mass. Especially if you're active, if you're doing any kind of exercising, aim for a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. And protein is going to help keep you full. It's the most satiating of all macronutrients. It increases your metabolic rate because it actually requires energy to metabolize it. So it's really good. It's supporting your muscles, it's burning calories, and it's keeping you full. So I always will encourage people to aim for the high end of their protein goal. After that, we usually would say, okay, so we're going to balance out our carbs and our fat. And you kind of have to so now we know how many calories you're going to eat, how much protein you should be going for. And this is how you should do your macros, regardless of dietary pattern. If you're going to choose fat for fuel, then you're going to keep your carbs low. If you're going to choose sugar and carbs for fuel, then you're going to keep your fat low. So it's kind of like a balancing act. And I like to think of carbs and fat as kind of like a teeter-totter. Like if you're going to have one, then if you're going to have a lot of one, then the other is going to be lower. So that would be a way that I would recommend people go. So for a ketogenic diet, I would recommend people to aim for, ultimately, once they taper their carbs, to be at 50 grams of carbs or less, and the rest of your energy would come from fat. So that would just be reflected in the however many calories you need. I actually have a macro calculator on my website at ketogasm.com. It's a macro calculator for women, and it figures out all of this kind of stuff. So you don't have to do the math. You don't have to worry about it. It's like plug and play, and you can plug it in and kind of adjust your goals. It's very customizable. So you can get the numbers, so you can figure out where to start or where to aim for, kind of just get a good idea of how much you should be eating to meet your goals that you enter in there.
I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes, because
Perfect.
I think that that's part of the confusion. You and I were talking about technology before we hit record, and this is another one of those things where it's a foreign language.
It is
in a lot of ways, because this is not how we're taught about food.
No, it's completely different, and there is a learning curve to it. It's hard because you aren't, especially if you're not used to looking at nutrition labels or looking up the nutrition data and certain things, and you just don't think how many grams of this, that, and the next thing are in this. And I think that it can be helpful for people to track those grams and carbs. And there's apps like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. Those are two really popular apps to track your food intake over the day, and it kind of does that juggling balance of the carbs and the protein and the fat to tally it up to see where you are actually at in your day versus your goals. But again, is that something that you want to do forever? I don't love doing that. I don't love plugging in an app every day, every bite that I put in my mouth. I don't like to do that. So it's good kind of just as a learning thing, but over time it becomes more of an intuitive process. But you have to do it to get that hands-on learning experience. You just have to get in there and start learning, making mistakes. They're not mistakes. They are learning opportunities. They are experiences. If you eat something and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that had 100 grams of carbs in it. that's not a big deal. You're not failing. You're not cheating. You are learning. That is all part of the process. So I think that that's a big thing that I really hope people do take away, that it can feel complicated. It can feel confusing because it's new, but this is a learning process. It is not a diet that has rules and you're being bad or, doing something wrong or cheating, and all that yucky diet language that you've learned is not something that you should be reinforcing with yourself as you try to make changes in your diet. It's all, ugh. Just to get rid of that. Don't say cheating on your diet. That's terrible. Don't say that.
Yes, we want what feels good so that we are motivated to continue.
Absolutely.
So as we round up our time together, can you kind of just condense some real encouragement or tips or kind of signposts for the women who are hearing this? 3 things maybe that might be good starting points, or 3 things to kind of, they can be resources, tips that you can share to kind of help women feel less overwhelmed by this information, because it's been so good, but where to start,
Absolutely. I think the best way to start is just tapering your carb intake. If you're interested in keto, that's going to be kind of the trigger, that like the first domino that you tip over that kind of sets everything off in the right direction. So focusing on that kind of thing and reading food labels and stuff like that. The other thing I think is really important is to journal what you're eating, because a lot of times we're not really aware and mindful of what we're putting into our mouths and how much we're eating or how it makes us feel or any of that. So being mindful with your food intake and having that mindful eating practice with journaling and kind of taking it slow and, being aware and in the present moment while you're eating, that's the next thing. So you don't have to go keto to be a mindful eater. You don't have to go keto to eat lower carb foods. You can do these kind of things very gradually. And as you become more aware of what you're eating and putting in your body, you will know what makes you feel good, and you'll be able to work towards that and make decisions based on what's on the paper, not just how you feel like eating that in that moment, right? And finally, I think learning more about keto and about nutrition in general can be really helpful. And I offer a free course called Hello Keto. It's a totally free course, and I walk people through the basics from your macros, how to calculate your macros, what keto is and isn't, and what foods support ketosis. And that's all on my website as well. So if you are interested in learning more about a ketogenic diet and how to make it work for you in very simple, easy terms, and kind of, I really want to get people away from the diet mindset. That's another resource, is the Hello Keto course at ketogasm.com.
Excellent. Well, Tasha, I have to say this has been very educational, very, very good information. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with my audience today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's so important for us to gather good and healthy information and to share it. So I appreciate you offering that free course. That's fantastic.
Thank you. I hope you guys love it.
Yes. And we'd like to know. So I've been talking with Tasha Metcalf. She is a nutrition educator, a blogger, an author of Keto, a Woman's Guide and Cookbook. Her website is keto-gasm.com, where you can get her resources there. If you're driving and you couldn't write any of this down, please head to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 142. I will have all of these links in the show notes for you. And while you're there, please leave your name and email address. Join my tribe. I send periodic resources out and reminders about the podcasts that are going out, as well as my YouTube channel. This way, you don't miss out on any good information. So as we have talked about today, think about your body as your friend. think about the goal of feeling good and being healthy. We don't cheat, we don't abuse, we support, we love, and we nourish our bodies. So take these resources, get in contact with Tasha and her website. Do what you can, my friends, to make 2020 the healthiest and the happiest year of your life, starting with how you think about, treat, and feed yourself, because it can make a world of difference in the quality of your relationships and your life. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation today. And please take the time to share this with your friends. It could change someone's life. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We look forward to sharing more life-changing conversations with you next time. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.